So the context that we're trying to set here is that we've been in a fortunate position to have delivered many production lines around the world, and many of them have actually been digitized as well. So more than 100 plus production lines are what we would term as Industry 4.0, so digitization, using computer vision, AI, all of these advanced technologies. But what we wanted to share with you was some of the challenges around that adoption and that, why has it not been as scaled? Why is Industry 4.0 not scaled as we expected, when we looked at it 12 years ago? And what we believe is that the biggest barrier is not a technology one, it's actually a human barrier. And just looking at the presentations from yesterday, I don't think anybody in the room, and maybe you can share your opinions now, that believes the technology doesn't exist to be able to properly transform. So we can have the debate about MQTT and OPC and this and that, but at the end of the day, we have the ability to, we have the technology to transform. So what's the problem? And we believe the human, us, is standing in the way. So we wanted to share some of these challenges with you. There's 5 of them. There's lots of words on the slides, and that's for purposes afterwards when you get the slides, but we will touch on a few of them. So the first one I want to touch on is really a leadership question. So what we believe is that many leaders in organizations believe that digital transformation is a project. And the problem with the project is that it has an end date. And the analogy I tell people is a diet versus a lifestyle, right? Hence the name of the presentation today. So many leaders think that, okay, I'm going to invest a certain amount, I'm going to do a project, and that's the end of it. Whereas it's a long-term view that leaders have to take. It's actually a lifestyle change in the organization that has to be adopted. So that's one of the key takeaways. There's a few others. The other one is the last point I want to make there is that I think it's important that leaders in an organization allow for mistakes to happen. Because if you're cutting edge, you're not always going to be right. In fact, you're going to be wrong more times than right. And so having a leadership team that allows that playing of technologies and trying new things is really critical.
So we are not saying that you shouldn't go with the consulting firms. But if your consultant doesn't have a pair of safety shoes that has character, maybe question it. So if you can just, sorry, the points. I think it's very important, something that we've learned along the way. It's very easy to come up with plans, and my grandfather was an engineer, and he said it's one thing to draw a line, it's another thing to build it. And that's exactly it. It's another thing to come up with a plan, and they give you great insights, but take it from where it's from, right? Make sure that those guys have spent enough time on the floor, because essentially that is where a lot of the change is going to happen, and where a lot of people need to adopt it as well. Yeah.
So the reason why we decided that Jeannie was going to do this one is because Jan said I'm not allowed to swear. Because I would never be able to go to the slide without swearing. So the next one is really centered around hardware, and I think this is where a lot of the non-safety shoes consultants fall down, is because I think they think that scaling technology is the same as scaling a cloud-based email platform, where there's no integration to hardware. And the moment you get to an electrical panel that looks like that, and you say, listen, I need to access data, and I need to write new data to the tags inside that PLC, it becomes a completely different story. So yes, I can do the airy-fairy cloud stuff, but when it comes down to a panel, the panel screwdriver to change terminals, it's a completely different story. And I think that's a very important understanding that people need to think of, is that scaling Industry 4.0 is not the same as scaling Facebook because of the hardware challenge. And because there's safety, there's time-based automation requirements. When you integrate to hardware, it's not easy. And I think from a leadership perspective, one has to understand that it's not easy integrating to hardware. And there's still the debate about, as we saw yesterday, MQTT, OPC, and many other communication protocols, etc.
So who knows this guy? The epitome of middle management, right? So, when it comes to something that we've come across along the way is there's this sort of fear of transparency that takes place as soon as you get buy-in from the top. And funnily enough, a lot of people think it's always the operators that kick against technology. A lot of the times it's your middle management. What we've sort of come across is that fear of transparency, because at the end of the day, we all want to give a good report, right? And that when that been good report has been coming, and now you have an objective system feeding data, it can give some insecurity to the guys to, is it going to reflect what I used to reflect, or something similar. So this has been quite an interesting find in some of the adoption challenges.
Yeah, and I think that comes from an experience with one specific customer, obviously not to be named, where the CEO was very keen to adopt some of the stuff we had. We did a POC. Operators were super excited because it made their lives much easier, but there was direct visibility from the operator to the CEO now. And so middle management felt a level of insecurity because obviously middle management explains to the leadership what their leadership wants to hear. Now there's no room to manipulate the information. And so there's this big brother feeling that middle management feel when you adopt. And so that requires leadership again. It's about explaining we're trying to bring efficiencies, we're not trying to create a whip. And that's why the right leader in the organization is really critical. So this was an interesting one around, especially the POC, there's those initial stages of adopting the technology. And obviously we do what we do, we create a team. And I think one of the biggest challenges around creating the team is that many people perceive Industry 4.0 as an IT-led initiative. It actually is completely the opposite. In our opinion, it has to be, without compromise, an engineering-led initiative because it is an impact on the shop floor. IT is a big enabler to that because we use IT technology on the shop floor. But the moment you have IT-led initiatives, you have many, many roadblocks, like cybersecurity is the biggest one. And so that becomes the main focus as opposed to delivering an outcome. Not to say cybersecurity is not important, it obviously is. But the initiative and the drive and the impact, the value to the business is actually from engineers on the shop floor, not the IT guys that manage the email servers, for example. And I think what happens is you have CIOs that are now responsible for Industry 4.0 initiatives, and the operational guys are just there for the ride. And I think it needs to be completely the opposite way, where information technology experts need to support the operational guys. I think that's a very important point.
Another key thing is obviously educating the team, right? I think Harvey asked it yesterday in the panel, how do you get the workforce involved and how do you actually get people excited about it? And I think it's the same way we all got excited about 4IR and all the technologies that come along with it, is we got an appreciation by using it and learning it and sort of seeing what it could do for us. So I think it's very important as an organization to make it available for people to just use, even if it's in a gamified way, so that they can actually start to appreciate the technology for what it is.
Yeah, and I think you can't understate the role of education across the organization. So not educating technologists, but educating an operator why this makes a difference and how it actually helps them. So these sound like very soft, airy, fairy things, and 5 or 6 years ago, people told us exactly these are the problems you're going to have, and we didn't believe them because we were so focused on the technology. And so when we started to get to customers and try to implement it, we were asking ourselves, why is it not being successful? And it's got nothing to do with the technology, actually. The biggest barrier is, as the opening slide said, is the human in the loop, not the technology in the loop. So what we tell our customers, as they enter into this digitization journey, is a very simple roadmap. This is not our sort of steps. You just Google this and you find this concept. But it's a very simple thing. So the first step is that digitization step, where you try to, for example, eliminate paperwork. You try to create some real-time visibility. You then start to automate some processes. It could be reporting, streamlining processes in terms of communication, for example. Report by exception. This is something that Walker talks a lot about. So you don't want to be spammed with information. You only want to be informed when there's an exception. And the last part, which is the crux of what we've been speaking about, is this digital transformation. And this is where an organization becomes intelligent, and you create this intelligent enterprise. And actually, that's the hardest part. Whereas everybody in the room here is focusing on the first 4 steps. And we tend to forget, and we're guilty of this, which is why we're sharing that, is that last part, because that's what the value is, why customers are paying us, is for that intelligence in their organization. And so what we recommend is, rather than starting with a massive, big digital initiative, we would say start with something simple, start and work through the process, even if you throw that technology away, even if that technology is not the perfect one for the long term. But organizations have to understand how difficult it is to change the human to adopt. And I think without understanding that cost, that impact, you can waste a lot of money up front trying to buy technology, adopt technology, and realize actually your organization from a human perspective is not ready for it. So we always suggest to a customer, start small, go through the whole process, and we always hak vast at the end there, right? And that's the South African term that I know if Walker Reynolds understands. But anyway, the point is that you gotta get to the end in some initiative so that you as an organization can understand what it takes to change people's minds.
Yes. And in the spirit of continuous improvement, you then create that cycle of actually starting to see what works, especially like Tien's also said, it's not a one size fits all, like you need to understand your environment and you need to adapt accordingly. And so then you build this sort of cycle of, okay, now we feel more comfortable, the guys on the floor more comfortable, okay, let's try something else, let's add more machines, and so on.
Yeah. It's okay to make the wrong technology decision.
Yeah.
As long as you've got the outcome, you can then re-engineer the technology until, once you know that the outcome is accepted in the organization.
And starting small is not going to cost you that much versus deploying it full on the first time around.